This is um this is probably the heaviest episode I've recorded so far. Kris moved to Sweden, and you know how it is with immigrants where we start chasing stuff. Like we literally start chasing stuff. He was so stressed that he ended up with stage 4 cancer. And at some point, the doctor said to him, Kris, there's nothing we can do. You're probably not going to make it out. Well, he did. And he's here. And this was so interesting. Let's get to it. How I came across your profile was I saw this post you put up on LinkedIn about your time in Sweden, and man, you shared some heavy stuff in there. Honestly, like you shared some heavy stuff in there. You did, honestly, because the thing I find interesting about immigration is how no matter who you talk to, the themes, the emotions, it's very similar. It's just everyone just comes at it differently. And I want to ask, like, if you look back at who you are today and all you've gone through, and you go back to the day you decided to leave Sweden, were you still thinking of, would you still do it again?
I literally asked that question of myself today. Today, I was thinking about that exact same thing. And, in fact, there's no way to go back into the past and recreate a future that is better than you can't recreate something totally new and think that it would be better. So the big answer, the general answer is no. I would keep things the way they were. And I've been through a lot in Sweden, a whole lot. But I think that the journey of life is colorful. It's colorful, and you have this set of opportunities, and you have this set of experiences that you go through. And it may not have been in Sweden, it might have been in New York, or it might have been in London, and it might have been home in Trinidad. Um, I'm not yet fully stabilized, and I don't know how long it takes, really, because it's been 4 years in Sweden already, 4.5 years. I'm not yet fully stabilized here, but I'm here for it.
Yeah.
When I left Sweden, when I left Trinidad, actually, it was, they say the typical immigrant comes to Sweden chasing love. When I left Trinidad, it was because I was dating a Swedish Trinidadian girl, and her mom was Trinidadian and she was Swedish, and she came to Trinidad sort of exploring her music career. She got an opportunity to sing, and I found it inspiring that she would leave her home to pursue a career in music, because that's really all she ever wanted to do, pursue a career in music, and she got the opportunity. After living in Trinidad with her for quite some time, I felt as though, and I'm a marketing strategist at this point. We were having a good time in Trinidad. I felt as though if we want to really build her music career, we're not going to do it in the islands. You can work and get money, but if you want to build your career, we needed to get out. And the more I learned about Sweden, just from her and understanding where she was coming from, the more I understood that Sweden was a place where music was really, really happening. All of the biggest pop stars on the planet were coming to Sweden to record music with the likes of Max Martin and Dennis Pop, who have written everything on the pop charts, from Baby One More Time and I Want It That Way, all the way up to I Can Feel My Face, and Beyonce, Lady Gaga. All of the biggest names in music have worked with Swedish producers. And I felt really strongly that we should be here for her and for her career. I thought, I could do anything. I could do anything anywhere. Listen, lots of people think so. This idea of a digital nomad. I was it. I was definitely it. I had my own consulting practice. I had many clients who I was just working with on my laptop. Caribbean clients, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad. Things were going good. I was teaching at the University of the West Indies. It was COVID, so I was teaching online. I was also teaching at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and I had a decent income. It was all online. So the move to Sweden was super easy when it came to just transitioning. I just had to take my laptop. Funny thing about me, fun fact, I took one pair of jeans and
You're really very digital nomad.
yeah. I thought that fantasy was, I really followed that fantasy. I said, listen, let's go build her career. I could do anything anyway. Boy, was it hard. It was hard. It, you know, being a consultant in the Caribbean, there was a degree of out of sight, out of mind that led to a decrease in clientele. Although I was actively trying to promote myself, the clientele was getting a bit sticky. Another post that I posted on LinkedIn recently talked about the fact that one of the things I decided to do to make friends in Sweden, because it's quite different, was join an acting class. And that was just out of pure, genuine desire to build community, knowing that community builds other things. And I joined this acting class, and it was so much fun. And one of the first opportunities that came was one of the students in the class. She said, come to my company, with shooting an ad, and we're paying 100 crowns to extras. 100 crowns is 10 US or something like that. So come show up on set, and we'll pay 100 crowns to extras. And I did it for the fun. And on set, it was a quick shoot. On set, I ended up just chatting with the communications manager for this organization, which just happened to be a body of the European Union. And she and I were talking about how difficult it is for marketers and project managers to bring value to an organization without their network. And I was telling her that I would be happy to volunteer. I'd be super happy to just show you what I can do so that you can be in my network. And she was like, did you say volunteer? We could use some volunteers. And I volunteered, and they were impressed with my work and asked me to come on as a consultant for a longer project. So I now had my first Swedish client. And I worked with them for a few months. And then when they were done, they wrote this letter to the agency that they were working with. This recommendation letter to sort of get me into a role at the agency. As it turns out, the agency had someone who was on paternity leave for 4 months. And so I jumped onto that leap pad, and I was there. That agency ended up retaining me for another year, but it was not like a permanent situation, and I was still very much on the outside. But it wasn't super high paying, so I continued to hustle and teach my classes and teach my in Trinidad and push for clients. I had actually worked for the agency 80%, so that every Friday I could do all of my Trinidad work. Another friend that I made at the acting class happened to be a senior lecturer, senior professor at the University of Gothenburg. And we actually were like super good friends. And he felt as though, I think you could add some value to my students. Are you available to do a guest lecturing situation with us? And so that was an opportunity that I took that validated me in Sweden, validating my teaching career, but also brought a little extra income, and also just allowed me to get a little bit more into Gothenburg. So here I am at this point. I had maybe about 3 or 4 clients in Trinidad. I was teaching at the University of the West Indies, teaching at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, teaching at the University of Gothenburg, and I'm doing this this part-time 80% agency gig as a strategist. And I mean, it was all to make ends meet. It wasn't, all of those things, they sound like a lot, but if you've ever taught at university, it's not a lot. It's not a lot. Uh, and so I was really, 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 really hustling. And what happened at that point, I remember I had just gotten this big energy sector client in Guyana, and Guyana is booming with oil now. So their economy is growing quite fast. I was super excited about this, but my plate was so full, and I had I had worked myself sick. Actually, I was diagnosed with burnout, anxiety, depression, and of course, just in time for winter. and and I got to a point where I had, and this is a whole other theme of conversation, but I got to a point where I had worked so hard that I could not work anymore. Despite that, I continued pushing through, and maybe about another eight months of showing up sick, um, which then found itself with a diagnosis for lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer, which I'm I'm pretty certain now. I don't. It's not scientifically proven, but I'm pretty certain from just the knowledge of my own body that this type of cancer was connected to my stress levels. I felt as though the two it just moved naturally into one, moved naturally into the other. Um, at the agency that I was at, as a strategist, it turned out that the work I was doing, the strategy work I was doing, was for a number of different Volvo companies. So I had Volvo cars as a client, I had Volvo trucks, Volvo construction equipment, Volvo Penta, and Volvo Group headquarters as a client. And in the year that I worked on strategies for all of these different Volvo companies, I felt, well, maybe I'll get into Volvo. Maybe maybe the next step for my career is Volvo, because I had never spent so much energy on one brand. I'm like 5 or 6 clients, and they're all Volvo.
Yeah.
And I applied for this job at Volvo Penta, and made it all the way through. Volvo Penta is the organization that sells boat engines, and made it all the way through to maybe about 5 interviews. Real talk, HR, senior vice president, vice president, another HR, logical test, psychometric test, all the way up to the very end. And I remember the senior vice president called me and said, after 2 months of interviewing, and said, "Kris, we really liked you. And in fact, we were down to 2, and it was a tie, and I had to make a choice, and I chose the other person." And I'm sharing this to say the lesson in that moment, because life was quite heavy, and that was actually a really major blow for me, because I thought I was moving into Volvo Penta. Um, the lesson in that moment was fail forward. I said to myself right away, there is really no going back to anything but Volvo at this time. Even though you failed at this point, you can still take everything you've learned, take all of your experiences, and use this failure as a push forward. And so I continued applying, and now I'll tell you, lots of people come into my inbox and ask me, "How do you get into Volvo?" Well, I applied about 50 times, 50, if so
Damn.
little. If so little. I know for sure it's at least 50, so I don't want to exaggerate. But I've been rejected by Volvo many, 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 many times. And when I got to the very end and was rejected again, I just saw it as a slip at the almost top of the mountain. So I applied again, maybe a few months later, and then the right job. And in fact, this job that I have now is much more suited to my personality and my experience and skill set than the one that I didn't get. So I got into the corporate headquarters on a team called Digital Experience, and I often post about Volvo and how great of a culture and how great of a context it is, not because I work in employer brand strategy, but I do.
Should I believe you?
So that's why I'm sharing transparently, right? It's because I went into Volvo sick, and I don't think anybody could understand what it feels like to need to show up at an organization, prove yourself, and you're falling apart. I was falling apart mentally. I'll share this. I don't talk about this on LinkedIn, but I'll share this for clear context. My marriage was falling apart. We were expecting a child. My career was many pieces of things, and I was away from my community. I was away from everyone. I mean, yes, I did make a friend or two along the way, but in Europe, friendships are not like Caribbean friendships. Friendships, and just to give a quick, it's a lot less spontaneous to hang out with a friend in Europe. And I just say that, respectfully, it's a lot less spontaneous. In Trinidad, it was a lot more. And so I went into Volvo sick, and they very, very quickly became my community. This idea of that culture of care that exists at Volvo, with people who did not know me, who showed up extremely for me with gifts, with checking in, with making sure that I was okay. I was working at Volvo for 1 month before I was hospitalized. And I was hospitalized for 3 months or so, because I had a really dramatic cancer experience. Because I had been sick for so long, it had gotten to stage 4 cancer, and many of my organs were not good, and my liver in particular was not capable of handling chemo. It wasn't strong enough to handle chemotherapy. So the doctor said to me, Kris, there really isn't anything we can do, because the cancer is so aggressive that it's probably going to kill you. But if we give you chemo, your liver is not going to handle it. So the chemo itself will probably kill you. So it's kind of a matter of time. And this is why I'm such an advocate for mental health, because I'm so sure that had I found a way to stabilize my experience and be less stressed, I might, or caught it earlier, I might not have had that extreme drama to deal with. In any case, we made the decision to administer chemotherapy because that was the only option available. It's die from chemotherapy or don't die from chemotherapy. And it worked. And so 5 months later, chemotherapy was over. And I had only my Volvo family in Sweden. And so I went back out to work. And I still had a bald head. I was still super skinny. And my boss told me, Kris, here's what we're going to do. You're just going to do anything that gives you energy. You're just going to work on whatever you want to. Luckily, I was in a role that made sense for me. So I worked on a lot of things that I wanted to. Yeah.
I just give you a minute to process this. That's a lot, man.
It is. Well, you started off by saying that it was heavy.
That's a lot, man. Like I knew it was heavy. I didn't know it was this heavy, man.
Yeah, that was the story.
When I read that post, I knew that the subtext was a lot. Like, it was obvious that there was a lot on sage stuff there, which is why I said this is a really heavy post, and I'm going to get this guy on the podcast.
Yeah, and
that is a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot that LinkedIn post to a great extent has a lot of makeup on it.
Yeah,
We look at LinkedIn, we spell check, we diplomacy check, and all of those things.
Yep.
But now we're having a conversation, and this is actually what has fueled those types of posts. And I was telling a friend of mine before that, this conversation that we're having about the immigrant experience requires a lot of diplomacy. The conversation on its own, you really you want to ensure that you express your experience respectfully. And the only way I can do that is to actually say what my experience was, what was actually happening inside of me. I'm not a sociologist. Is that the word, sociologist?
The
Yeah.
psychologist, whatever. It's the
Yeah.
same. I mean, I think.
And so I'm not qualified to speak on the goings on of Swedish society, but I can tell you what happened to someone who was extremely overworked and extremely isolated. And so I give so to close off that point and to give you an opportunity to segue. The Volvo experience for me was so beautiful. It was one of those situations that really allowed me to feel like there was some solid ground that I'm standing on top of. So I'm very grateful to them, just as a human, that was one of the things that really gave me stability. And stability was something that I craved and went after in the midst of all of these clients and all of this digital nomad work and becoming a father and all of those things. Stability was something that I really, really craved and went after. And I think that what I can share on that in that regard is seek stability. I think maybe if I'd moved when I was 19, I moved when I was 33. If I'd moved when I was 19, I might have had a different type of resilience.
Yeah.
But at the stage in life that I was at, I needed to actively seek stability. And it took me maybe a year and a half to put that into words. That I knew I was seeking community first. So seek community. I knew that the acting class, those types of things. That was one goal. But then after that, the seeking of stability, which means that we have to define stability for ourselves. Because even when I lived in the Caribbean, I didn't really value the big corporation lifestyle. I didn't feel like that was for me. I thoroughly enjoyed having many clients and it being in many industries, and which allowed me to show up at different types of events and all. I really enjoyed that in the Caribbean. But it wasn't super stable. The stability I had was from my family and from my reputation in the Caribbean. But I had no family in Sweden. I had no reputation in Sweden. And so I had to find a place to plant myself. And I think that the relentlessness, the way that I kept applying for Volvo is a story in itself, because it allows people to recognize that you can still get there. You don't, just because you didn't hear back from a company once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times, that doesn't mean that there's not something there that is worthwhile for you, that's going to have a lot of value for you. And it really was worth it.
Yeah. I think there's just there are a ton of lessons in there, to be honest. There's the lesson, I really like when you said fail forward, because, and I appreciate, when there's a lot of things you're going through as an immigrant. So when you fail, sometimes it can be crushing and you just want to walk away from it. But, I really like how you call it, like, yeah, it's crushing, yes, but just fail forward. Like, what are the lessons from all this that just happened and how do you use it to get better? Don't just give up, like, because you already did the most insane thing by packing your lives into 2 bags or so and moving to a new country. So why do you want to run away from what's in front of you? Like, what do you want to do? You want to go back home? You're already here, by the way.
Going back home was all I wanted to do.
Yeah, I can
I
imagine.
can't tell you how heavy of a feeling that was, how much I craved and really just wanted to go back home. It was so bad. I had a conversation with someone who recently moved from the UK. Actually, he moved from the UK via Italy. And he was telling me, I really want to go back home. And and I so get it. I so get it. But having a child in Sweden meant that if I am showing up as a present parent, if I am to ensure that my child has her father, I mean, as much as I'm alive, and she almost lost me, so why would I,
Yeah.
actively give her that loss? Then leaving Sweden just isn't an option.
Yeah.
And so for a little while, I felt trapped. Um, I felt, oh, I have to stay. I don't get to stay. I have to. But in order to manage the mental stress that thought process would bring, I made a decision to fall in love with Sweden, to try, to really try to build a relationship with Gothenburg, where I live, and explore new places. So I asked around. I just asked random colleagues and stuff, what's cool to do in Gothenburg? As it turns out, there are a lot of beaches here, which after 4 years of living here, I had not really been to the beach. I didn't think about it. So I went to the beach, man. I went to the beach, all of them, all different types. Or Europe is not the Caribbean, so all different all different types of beaches. With friends, with acquaintances, by myself. I went with a book. Things I've never done in Trinidad. Go to the beach with a book? No, I go with friends. But I went with a book. I went with music. I did a lot of hotel restaurants. I drove 6 hours to a county called Dalarna. I explored. I really tried to find things that I like here, things that can make me feel at home. Autumn came quickly, and
Always does.
winter's coming. Yeah, autumn came quickly and brought its darkness. Um, and I bought a lot of candles. Um, even, even little fake ones. These are fake candles.
you know,
And
you know,
I
you know,
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, this thing you say about deciding to fall in love, like I love it so much. Sorry I caught you. I love it so much because there's a theme I want to explore, or I want to just talk about, which is the fact that when you move, you get into this checklist life. Is you quickly want to start making money, start making good money. There's the thing at the back of your head that I think it's a subconscious drive to quickly become successful, so you can tell people back home that the move worked out. It wasn't exactly a failure. It happens to a lot of people. And then before you know, you get into all sorts of things and stress and stuff, and you literally start wondering whether the thing was really worth it, because you are just caught up in this insane back and forth, working, surviving. And I almost feel like saying to yourself that, you know what, I'm going to fall in love with this city I'm in, and I'm going to fall in love with this country, and I'm going to enjoy the country. It's so freeing because it actually gets you on the path towards the success you were looking for, rather than just saying to yourself, you know what, I have this checklist that I want to tick off and I need to do all these things. And when we look at those checklists, it's all work. I need to start earning $300,000 by this time. I need to buy a house. I need to buy a Mercedes Benz. I need to do this. I need to go on a vacation and send pictures to my friend and share when on vacation. I need to do this. And then 2
Are
years,
you
3
reading
years
my
down.
ChatGPT conversations?
Sorry?
Are you reading my ChatGPT conversations?
Honestly, it's just so, which is why I like that thing you said about that deliberate act of saying, I live in Calgary and I'm going to fall in love with Calgary. It
Yeah.
changes how you see the move. It changes you. Like
Yeah.
it changes you. And then the resulting effects on your life just they're all downstream. Everything just changes from there. But it starts with you saying to yourself, I am going to accept myself for who I am and enjoy the city and fall in love with this city.
I like what you said because, it moved from I'm going to fall in love with Gothenburg to, well, here I am falling in love with my life because
Yes.
it's not just about my life in Gothenburg, it's my life.
Yes.
And
Yes.
me 3 years ago saying, I hate my life in Sweden. I remember calling my friend in London and saying, I hate it. And me saying, I hate my life in Sweden was me saying, I hate my life. And what happened was my life almost ended. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, going back to that question where you asked me at the beginning, would I change anything? This is my life. Would I give this up? Would I give up being a parent? Would I give up my career, which was very hard, but that difficulty gave me so much resilience and so much strength. Now at this point, I walk into a room and I have zero imposter syndrome. Zilch. I know who I am. I know what I bring to the table. I know where I've been. I'm very, very secure in my value. And I think all of that came from the mountains that I've climbed. And I miss my family. I'm very much, I miss my friends very, very much. But I no longer live in Trinidad. I'm not at home in Trinidad anymore. It's sad. I went home this year for Carnival, of course, in February.
Oh, you have to. I plan to go for one of them like next year I plan to go.
If I could never miss Carnival for the rest of my life, I will never miss Carnival for the rest of my life. But it's a party. It's a party. I slept at my brother's place. I don't have a home there. I don't have a vehicle there. I don't. People have their routines. People have their jobs. I no longer fit in Trinidad. Wait, what? There's no going back.
Yeah.
There's no going back. There's only going forward. And so I can't continue to fight against my life as it is in Sweden.
Yeah.
I need to fight for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. And it validates something I've been thinking about a lot, the concept of the whole self. And I always say to everyone, I call immigrants the in-betweeners. Like really, once you move, you're in between cultures. You're in between. You're never fully Swedish. I mean, maybe as we get older, you come somehow fit in. But I think like
never
I don't. Yeah, I don't know if you ever fully fit in. Except you moved here as a kid, and you're never fully Trinidad and Tobago anymore. However, the beauty of the whole self is accepting that duality and just understanding that you need to bring those two selves together, because that's really a whole self. Because I think a lot of people struggle with that identity in the sense that they say, oh, I'm Nigerian and I'm struggling to fit into the Canadian culture with my Nigerian culture. And I'm like, yes, you will struggle to fit in because you haven't fully accepted the part of you that's here right now, which goes back to what you said about it went from I'm loving the city to I'm loving my life. Because what you've done is you've accepted who you are. This is me. I am part Trinidad and part Swedish, and it just brings a Kris that is not exactly fully Swedish or fully Trinidad, but that's who I am, and that's what it is. And I bring that to work. But what it allows me to do is allows me fit into society, allows me find my way, allows me be myself. So why waste it? Why throw that away? Why make that strength a weakness? Like, why do that to yourself? That sort of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Making that strength a weakness. but it takes a while before you can see that as a strength.
Yeah.
It,
You
it
know,
takes
I
a little
agree.
while.
There's a struggle. It's not easy to do so. And it's normal as a human being. Like we kind of I left in my 30s too. It's hard to shed off your former identity. It's pretty hard. That's all
Yeah.
you've known. Like, you know, you become, like someone said, there's an episode I published of recent where the lady says, when you pass through the security gates at the airport in Sweden, for example, it's almost as if your identity is erased in a way. Like as you pass through that, you're put into a box, immigrants. Like that's the box, immigrant or African. That's the box of your put in. And everyone sees you through that box. And then every single time you're trying to prove that, no, I am this, I'm not just this. Because every single thing that happens, you're painted with this one single brush. Oh, all you immigrants, or all you Africans, or all you black people. And so that mental battle itself is already a lot. And it's not easy to deal with. Like, so I accept that is not easy because I know I struggle with it at times. Like, you either vacillate between getting angry and getting frustrated and getting sad. You just go in between that, you know?
Yeah. I had someone say to me the other day, "You're a good immigrant."
Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
That's the stuff. That's the stuff. You know, being an immigrant and breaking into society is something that I felt always needs some light to be shed, because I think that Swedish people and maybe Canadians as well see themselves as quite open-minded, quite open people, and I think that in many ways they are. Um, but there is something that might be a bit blind, which is this idea that in Sweden, people are super close knit with their communities. They keep their friends from childhood straight up to adulthood. Those friends create networks, those groups of friends create networks, which become corporate networks. It becomes the job market.
Yeah.
And so, despite the value that the diversity of immigration brings, it's extremely challenging to get into those networks if you didn't go to school with a Swede, or
Yeah.
I don't even know if marrying into those situations helps. I actually don't think it does. And so I talk often about running twice as fast, be, and and people may think, well, in Sweden we don't have a very high tempo work culture. It's very work life balance oriented, but that's for those who have a job. For those who are trying to get in, I mean, I was running 10 times as fast. You know,
Yeah.
it's you're running many engines trying to get into any door that is closing on you.
Yeah.
And so I think the lesson for all of us is, in this cultural difference, we have to be sensitive to the fact that, well, for one, I don't think people are actively trying to halt diversity or
Yeah.
keep people out, but it may not so easily be seen that people are being kept out. And we who are on the outside have to find a formula to get on the inside. And we can't get upset, we can't get mad, because we have to be sensitive to the cultural differences. And so one of the things that um, I tell people a lot to do is volunteer. Volunteer for things. Another thing that I did was I volunteered for TEDx Gothenburg. I volunteered my time. I helped them build a strategy for the last couple of years. I hosted a program for free because I have some television experience. I did a large recruitment campaign and recruited the team that is currently the marketing communications team. All of that was volunteering my effort, and it wasn't volunteering with this specific goal in mind. It's volunteering so that you you give value. I mean, there is a karmic value that of course
Yeah.
exists. You give that karmic value, but there is also this you don't know who is seeing you and who they know and who
Yeah.
could use your help and who can bring you into a room that you wouldn't otherwise have been in. So I've been championing volunteerism for a long time. And I think in my experience championing it, I know that not everyone buys into it. It's not as simple as it sounds. Lots of people feel as though I cannot afford to give any more time. But it's like meditation. Deepak Chopra says if you can't find 10 minutes to meditate, then you need to find 20 minutes to meditate. You know, you really need to, you have to be able to give of yourself. So that is something that really opened those doors, those closed societal doors that got me in to little windows because people knew what I could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
There
a
was
good
another.
point, honestly. That's a really
Yeah.
good point. And I like how you tied it together, because those friendship circles go and become work circles.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's very hard to break into the friendship circles. It's same here in Canada too. Like with the kids, it's different. They're all growing together, so you see the circles are mixed. But once you go up, like I went out with one day with my family, and I told my wife that, it's so interesting. Canada is so multicultural and diverse and all that stuff, but when you go into the parks and look at how people are gathered to have picnics and party and stuff, then we're not exactly very multicultural. We're still all tribal. We're still all in different groups. And like you said, it's even if you feel you're on the outside, there's no need getting angry, because what you're seeing is that's the first human instinct. We go towards those who we know, who we understand, who we are familiar with. And so the question is, I mean, you do want the other side to put some work in, but the question is on your side is you don't go anywhere. You don't make any progress by starting to antagonize the other party, or play the victim card, or
Tell me
or
about it.
or try.
In
You
any
don't.
in any relationship dynamic,
Yes,
you make no progress by creating enemies.
yes, you don't. Like you don't, because the question is, there's this thing I always say. I forget. It's one of these mental models where he says that if someone comes to you and says, Kris or Dozier, I think this fence is bad, break it down. What I should first ask you is, I think I need you to go and first understand why this fence was created. When you understand why it was created, then we can break it down. Because more often than not in society, all we do is we come and say, that's bad, scatter it. You don't even spend time to understand why it was designed in the first place. Because when you understand why it was designed, you'll be like, oh, this is what we were trying to stop, or this is why it was okay. So maybe we need to take the good part of it and throw away the bad part that doesn't work anymore. We do this thing of where throw the baby and the bathwater out. Like it's an African proverb, I think, where just throw the baby, throw the bathwater with the baby in it, and like, oh yeah, we fixed it. No, you haven't fixed it. You haven't done anything. Which is why I like what you said about when you said there's no need to get angry about. It's just, what do we need to do? Like, how do we create more bigger circles and find your way into the circle?
What
Obviously,
is my
obviously the initial stages won't be interesting. It'll be awkward. I mean, it's going to be awkward because everyone is learning themselves. It'll be awkward.
yeah. Something else that I've been carrying with me through my 4-year journey here has been the difference between the experience of riding a bus in Trinidad and in the Caribbean, and I suspect in Latin American and Afro and Indo cultures, Indian cultures, you step onto the bus and you say good morning to everyone. And if you don't say good morning, especially let's say you're a child and you step onto the
you're gonna get called out.
exactly. If you don't say good morning, some old lady is going to tell you something. Somebody's going to tell you, "Don't you have any manners?" Or
Yeah.
you're reprimanded. It is rude if you step onto a bus and do not say good morning. Well, in Sweden, Nobody does that. If you
Yeah.
step on top and say good morning, someone is going to think you are crazy. And and the fact is that what I have learned in my time here is people cherish their personal space. Nobody wants
Yeah.
to be bothered and having to look up to you to say good morning to you, especially if you have nothing to tell them.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
If you're greeting someone to tell them good morning, it's because you have something to say to them. You're not just going to
Yeah.
say good morning to a stranger on a bus for no reason. And it sort of gives respect to the fact that people are busy with their lives and they're doing what they're doing and we're not trying to interrupt them. And so being sensitive to both sides of those social norms and expectations, I'm pretty sure when I first stepped onto a bus, I thought people were rude. But
Yeah.
a little reading, a little research, a little speaking to people helps you to understand a lot that stepping into a new culture is, as you said, understanding why the fence was built.
Yeah.
You can't decide that you're angry because the way people socialize is different to the way you've socialized in the past. And so the challenge is, how do I show up as me? Do I do the madman thing and step on the bus and say good morning because that's who I am? Or do I lose myself into the Swedish culture? And that's interesting, isn't it? This idea of where do I exist? And you said the right thing, you exist in between.
Yeah, I
You,
don't believe in assimilation. I don't like. I know it's a some people find it sensitive, but I don't believe you should assimilate. Like no one should assimilate. Like because assimilation somehow assumes that the other part of you is horrible or is not good enough. I don't believe that. I believe in integration. I believe in asking yourself like you have an identity and it's powerful in its own right. The question is you're just gaining a new identity. Mix the two. Why would you say wipe out the rest? This is not some psychosis or hypnosis where they wipe out part of your brain and install a new individual in. It's a lie. Like I when I hear people say assimilation, I'm like, no, I don't think that is the right way to say it. It's people find it very sensitive, but that's just my take on it. Like it's just my
yeah,
my perspective on it.
yeah.
I
I
think I
I I'm still learning.
look, this has been good. I think I just have one question for you. You know, in all this is it's just kind of it's exploring something you said. What do you miss most about home aside from family?
It's funny you say aside from family because that was the first thing. I really miss my
No, yeah,
family.
I don't want to because everyone says family. No, not family.
I oh, I miss a few things. I miss too many things to say one, but it's at the
Okay,
very top
tell
of
me
the
all of
list.
them. Tell me all of them.
At the very top of the list is the food. Come on. Come on, man. I miss Irie Bites and El Pecos. And on the avenue. Listen, I miss the food, but I also miss the lightness of culture, the way that
Mm,
that uh uh uh, uh, uh I want to say a lime, but that's such a Trinidadian word. The way a lime can just happen. A lime is where two or more people just get together and hang out spontaneously,
mm,
and this spontaneity of hanging out. I really miss that. In Europe, it feels as though someone always has something to do. You're always on a time. In
yeah.
the Swedish, it is Broughton. They have Broughton. They have somewhere to be. Um, and in the Caribbean, it definitely that's I really miss, a neighbor walking by and they stop and say hi, and then 6 hours later, you're hanging out with 10 more neighbors. And that's something I really, and somehow the days, because of that life, the days felt longer. They felt like you can do more things. Um, I think that's what I really miss. I really, really miss home for the spontaneous hanging out with friends and strangers. I that Yeah, that's, and I
Yeah,
I
that
I don't know if maybe I can cultivate that somehow in a community here in Europe. We see.
yeah, it's good. I think it'll be difficult because I feel like that culture is a function of how the system is designed, which is that thing about trying to understand why people behave in certain ways. Is that culture is a function of the system. So the system it's a very interesting topic to that's there. But the system is designed this way, and so we live that way. You know how I want to come see you. I tell you, Kris, I'm coming. You know, and you put in a calendar. Does is coming on this day? I'm like, who does that? When we moved here, I struggle with that a lot. My wife goes like every single time, oh, it's in the calendar. I'm like, what is the calendar? Why should I check the calendar? You know, but then it's not part of me. My calendar I literally have when I work out, when I meditate, when I do personal development. My calendar is active. It's active. Right? I wouldn't do that back in Nigeria.
Right. And this is the in-betweenship. This is what I mean by I can't go back home because now I also function like that. And so I can't, and because I function like that to such a great extent, it would feel very uncomfortable going back to Trinidad where you're now anchored because your calendar is going and people don't care about your time. So it is what it is, right?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. This has been God. I didn't want to explain. You know, I'll confess. Like, I didn't want. Like, when you told me all the stuff about the cancer and stuff, gosh, man. Like, I don't know. I just said, you know, I'm not gonna ask any questions about it anymore because, like, that is something, man. I'm so happy you're fully recovered. I'm so happy that you're here talking to me, man. I'm honored that you came on this. Honestly, like, I'm so honored because, bro, I can't even imagine what you're going through in your head.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. I mean, I mentioned all of this to give the realities of the experience. You know, it's not easy, you know, but there are ways to be resilient. There are ways to keep showing up, and even someone like me who's gone through, you know, one of the more difficult types of experiences one can go through as an immigrant, I'm continuing to show up for myself, and I'm continuing to show up for my life. And I think that's something I really wanted to share. It's something that you know, people are going through a hard time as immigrants, and there are ways, you know, there are ways to survive.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honestly, like, thank you. This has been inspiring. You're a superhero. If people don't tell you that enough, you're a superhero. We're gonna get you wings, man, like a cape, and like you fly around. Kris super.
I think this podcast episode is going to do exceptionally well. I think this podcast episode is the wings itself.
Yeah, thanks, man. I honestly haven't recovered from this. Like, still, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to be thankful for, and I hope you got that to enjoy. Thank you for getting to this point. Please share with anyone who will find it useful. Please subscribe, and if you know someone who we should talk to, please send them my way. Thank you.